That was an instrument called an mbira, M-B-I-R-A. It comes from Zimbabwe, and it was played somewhat clumsily by yours truly. I've been told by musicians from that country that their belief is that the music must rattle and buzz if the spirits are to hear it. That without that sort of cracked, rattling sound, the spirits won't hear the music and so won't be nourished by the beauty of the music. I'm Jay Leeming, and this is the Crane Bag Podcast. We are telling the Iliad. We are beautifully deep into this story. And may this story rattle and buzz as well, so that it speaks and nourishes the unseen world, so that there may be life and joy, not only in our own time, but in a time yet to come. Thank you for joining me. Let us begin. Helen was weaving in her room, at the top of a tower, in the very heights of Troy. From that room, she could look far out into the world. From that room, she could look deep into her heart. As her fingers worked, she sang, and as she sang, she wove an immense tapestry, depicting the battle between the Trojans and the Greeks. She wove every soldier into that tapestry, giving to each one breath and life. She wove Odysseus into that tapestry. Odysseus, bleeding from his left shoulder, desperate, surrounded by Trojan warriors, shouting for help. She wove Menelaus into that tapestry, urging his horses on, racing his chariot so that it came right up next to Odysseus. She wove Menelaus into that tapestry, hurling a spear into the throng of Trojan soldiers, so that Odysseus could leap into that chariot and the two of them could go racing away. She wove Agamemnon into that tapestry, limping from a wound he'd received in the thigh. Nestor staggering back to the Greek camp. She wove all the Greek soldiers into that tapestry, desperate, working by night to build a great wall just outside their camp. A wall built from oak trees they had felled from forests far to the south. She wove them all into that tapestry, working by night in the moonlight, building a bristling barricade to keep the Trojans out. She wove the Trojan army into that tapestry, no longer retreating to the city, but camping each night there on the Trojan plain. She wove their campfires into that tapestry, and the soldiers around them laughing and talking, and the sparks from those crackling flames rising up to mingle with the stars. Helen was weaving in her room, at the top of a tower, in the very heights of Troy. From that room, she could look far out into the world. From that room, she could look deep into her heart. Well, one night, all of the Greek kings gathered in the tent of Agamemnon. And Agamemnon, who had been wounded in the thigh, and so found it difficult to stand, remained sitting in his chair and said, "Truly, dear friends, our darkest hour has come. For the Trojan warriors do not return to the safety of their city each night, but instead camp openly on the plain. For they feel that the gods are on their side, and that soon they will break down our wall, burn all our boats, and kill us all on this desolate shore." And perhaps they are right. Perhaps the gods have turned against us. I regret we ever came across the sea. I regret that ever I desired to take the shining city of Troy. So, in this dark hour, let us return home. Let us save the lives we have. Let's turn our backs on this city and sail across the sea. Let us return home. And hearing these words, Diomedes stood up and said, "Go home? Go home? Is that your advice for us, Agamemnon? Is that your wise counsel? Once you urged us on to victory, but that was years ago. Perhaps you are a different man now. Yes, the Trojans camp right outside our gates, but I think as yet. Yes, the Trojans camp right outside our gates, but I think there is hope still. I have breath in my body and spirit and life. You go limping across the sea if you want to, but I will remain here, for the tide of battle can change, and we have inner resources that are as yet untapped, secret strengths. I say, in this darkest hour, let us call upon our strength and our will, for these powers, too, can change our fate." Well, it was then that Nestor spoke up. Nestor, the old man, given 3 lifetimes by the gods. He stood up before them all in his ragged blue cloak, and he said, "Agamemnon, you speak the truth. Indeed, this is our darkest hour. Never has the world of death seemed so close, now that the Trojan army does not retreat to the city, but remains camped outside our wall. And, led on by man-slaying Hector, they are indeed determined to break down our wall, burn all our boats, and kill us all on this Trojan shore. But Diomedes, you speak a truth as well. All is not lost. We have yet strength and life, and there are indeed within us hidden resources that are as yet untapped. And I think not only of ourselves, but of Achilles. How long has it been? He has been nursing his anger in his tent with his Myrmidons. Let us go to him. Let us make peace with him, so that he may join us, that he may find compassion in his heart to fight with us against the Trojans. If he were to do this, I think that the tide of battle would change, and that we might yet take the city of Troy and return home in victory. So then, let us do this. Let us make peace with Achilles." Yes, said Agamemnon, let us go to Achilles. Speak with him, you, Odysseus, Phoenix, and Ajax, the three of you, this very night. Go to Achilles, and tell him that I will return to him the girl Briseis, who I took from him some time ago. And furthermore, I swear before you all that I have not touched her, have not lain down with her, as is the custom of man and woman. And what's more, I will give him 20 of my fastest horses, and 20 bronze tripods untouched by the fire, and 20 gleaming cauldrons. And if it be the will of the gods that we are to take Troy, then he should choose 10 of the most beautiful women of that city for his very own, outside Helen, of course. And that he should freely load down his boat with all the bronze and gold that it can carry. And if it be the will of Zeus, Lord of the lightning, that we should return over the roaring sea to our homes, then I swear I will give him 7 cities in my kingdom of Mycenae. And what's more, I will offer him any one of my 3 daughters to have as his own for his wife. And finally, I say this, I will adopt him as my own son, to be treated as such by my family and friends, and by all my descendants, for as long as this world shall last. Yes, I will make peace with Achilles, that we all might be saved. For I was blinded by anger, I could not see. So Agamemnon spoke. And hearing these words, Odysseus, Ajax, and Phoenix, the wise counselor, left the tent of Agamemnon, and walked between the boats down to the roaring sea. And then they walked along the shore, under the circling stars. And after a time Phoenix stopped. They all stopped and stood there in silence as the waves crashed. And Phoenix said, Dear friends, let us make offering to Poseidon, the earth shaker, that he might bless this our task, that we might turn the heart of Achilles, so that he fights with us once again, that we might ward off Hector and his thousands of warriors, who bring death and cruel pain and consuming fire. So he spoke bright words, praising Poseidon, the earth shaker. And the words went up between the land and the sea, towards the circling stars. And for a moment they all stood there, as the sea crashed, as the wind blew. And then they turned and walked along the shore, past all the boats of the Achaeans, until they came to the last boat, and they walked around the stern of that boat and along the side, and there was the last tent at the very edge of the Greek camp, the tent of Achilles. And walking towards it, they heard a surprising sound. They heard music. They walked closer, and they realized it was Achilles singing. And then they stood in the doorway and looked into the tent. And there was Achilles with a lyre in his hands. And before him sat Patroclus, listening dreamily, as Achilles' fingers moved over the strings of the lyre, and his voice went up. sound of his voice, they saw great forests, and in the sound of his voice, they saw a shining sword and a shield. They saw a man dressed in a lion's skin, wrestling a great snake, a great dragonish snake, its vaporous breath burning the air, scalding his shoulders. But still he worked to wrestle this snake to the ground. And in his voice, they saw a goddess, snarling in her heart, looking down from the high skies of the world. And in his voice, they saw this man dressed in a lion's skin, striding, weary but determined, into a great and dark forest. But then Achilles saw them all there in the doorway, and he set his lyre down beside him, and he stood up, and he said, "Ah, surely you are the most dear to me of all the Achaeans, who could possibly come to me on this night, out of the darkness and the sound of the sea. Sit, my friends, sit here, be welcome." And he stood up, and he and Patroclus brought before them all bread and roast meat and honey-hearted wine. And they ate and drank these things, sharing the good things that were before them. But after some time, Odysseus spoke, and he said, "Achilles, we are grateful to be welcomed by you in this way, grateful to share the gifts of the good earth with you. But we have not come here simply to eat and drink. Hard sorrow compels us to come here, and grief for ourselves and our companions, for all those who have come across the ringing seas here to the desolate land of Troy. For it seems now we will all die here in this land. For the Trojan army does not retreat at night to the city, but camps openly on the plain. We see there thousands of campfires every night. The soldiers there, strong and powerful, led by Hector, man-slaying Hector. And he is determined to destroy the wall we have built, to bash his way through, to burn our ships, and to kill us all here on this shore. And our weakness in this hour is such that it seems to us that he might in fact succeed, and that this is in fact fated by the gods. Yet, nevertheless, we come to you. We come to you with hope, hoping that in your hearts still there is compassion for us and all your companions here in the land of Troy. And I bring to you a message from Agamemnon himself, the Lord of men, and it is this. He says that he will give to you the girl Briseis with the long flowing hair, which he took from you some time ago. He will return her to you, and what's more, he swears that he has not touched her, has not lain down with her, as is the custom of man and woman. And what's more, he will give you 20 of his fastest horses, and 20 tripods that have been untouched by the fire, and 20 cauldrons of beautiful gleaming bronze. And if we are to conquer Troy, if that be the will of the gods, Agamemnon says that when we do that, you should pick 10 of the most beautiful women out of that city, besides Helen herself, and have them for your very own. And what's more, you should load down your boat with all the bronze and gold that it can carry. And if it be the will of the gods that we all return home safely, then he promises to give you 7 cities in his kingdom of Mycenae, and that you may pick any of his 3 daughters to have as your wife. And finally, he declares, that he will adopt you as his own son, to be treated as such by himself, his family, his friends, and by all his descendants for as long as this world shall last. Agamemnon has set aside his anger for the greater good, Achilles. And so we come to you on this night, imploring you to do the same, to set aside your anger, to accept this offer from Agamemnon, and to join us, so that we may save ourselves, so that we may take the glorious and beautiful city of Troy. Tell me, son of Peleus, what is your answer? And Achilles looked at them all and said, My friends, I will speak clearly and from my heart. For I hate like death itself that man who holds one truth in his heart but says quite another thing with his voice. And besides, I think that you, Odysseus, if we were to go on like this, you would sit on one side of me and then the other, and you would talk all night, and there would be no end to it. So I will tell you exactly what I feel. I care nothing for Agamemnon or for any of his gifts. He may keep them all. I am done with fighting. I will not fight the Trojans. In fact, I think I will sail home tomorrow, and in 3 days I will reach the sweet, deep-soiled land of Phthia, which is my home. No, I will not fight. The Trojans, what have they done to me? Have they sailed across the sea to attack my palace, to ravage my lands and attack my family? No, they have not done this. It is we who have come, thieving pirates that we are, hoping to smash our way into the city of Troy and to steal everything of value which the Trojans possess. Have we not hands, hearts, and minds? Are we not able to build and create? We come like cruel children who cannot care for themselves. But I will not do this any more. I will not fight the Trojans. For I have seen that death comes both to the man who struggles in the battle and the one who remains sleeping at home in his tent. So I will set sail tomorrow, with my dear love Patroclus, across the loud resounding sea. And in 3 days we will come to that sweet, deep-soiled land of Phthia, which I love. And we shall spend our days not fighting and killing, but walking through the forests, listening to the murmur of the wind and the songs of the birds, and walking along the shore, hearing the crash and whisper of the waves. That is the truth of life, and not fighting and struggle and death. I refuse glory. Tell Agamemnon this. Tell him I will fight the Trojans no more, and I care nothing for Agamemnon or his gifts. Well, hearing these words, they were all deeply troubled. But then Phoenix, the wise teacher, spoke up and said, Ah, but Achilles, dear boy, have you no compassion for all those who have come across the sea to this land of Troy? Has your anger blinded you so to the fate of all of your companions? For you are not simply a man acting alone, but part of a larger world of effort, brotherhood, and love. You say you will not fight and you will not kill, but by doing so, you doom countless numbers of your companions to death. How many will be sent down as whispering shades to the dark realms of the underworld, all because you remained here sulking in your tent? Achilles, remember the friendship that you have felt, the companionship between you and all of us who have come across the sea, all of us who call ourselves Achaeans. Remember that, and then choose another path. And Achilles said, I hear what you say, Phoenix. You are indeed a wise man. I do have compassion for all of them. But my compassion leads me not to help them in the fight, but to give them this advice. They should all do as I do. They should all leave. Yes, we should not trouble the Trojans in this way. They should all choose a life at home, a life of happiness and joy, and stop thieving and pillaging these foreign cities. That is what my compassion bids me to say. They should think for themselves and return home across the sea to their own dear lands and families. They should stop fighting for the glory of Agamemnon, stop fighting in this ridiculous and brutal war. And then Ajax said, Achilles, Agamemnon, the lord of men, has returned the girl Briseis to you, who he took from you some time ago. So all is as it was before. Why cannot you take up your sword again, as you were willing to do when we first arrived here in Troy? Have you become frightened? Are you scared? Why is it that you abandon us and remain here in your tent, hiding from the fight? And Achilles said, Ajax, you are a good warrior. Your sword and your spear are sharp, but I would that your thoughts were as sharp. Do you not see what is happening around you? Do you not see how we have come across the sea, all of us, simply to fight for the glory of Agamemnon? But this glory is as empty as the sand. I will not crave such glory any more. My mother, the goddess Thetis, told me I could live a short life of glory or a long life of obscurity. Well, what is obscurity but to give up this mad hunger for fame and brightness of name? No, I have changed since that first day when we all arrived on the Trojan shore. For now I see Agamemnon for the empty ghost that he is. And I will spend my days, not fighting and killing, but laughing and singing in the land I love. And I urge you and everyone else to do the same. Put down your sword, Ajax, pick up an oar, and sail home. Well, they were all troubled by his words, but it seemed then that more talking would accomplish nothing. So they said goodbye to Achilles and to Patroclus, and they turned and they walked out of the tent. And as they walked away, they heard Achilles pick up his lyre again and begin to sing. And the sound followed them for a while, drifting this way and that in the sea air, and then it faded away. And when they returned to the tent of Agamemnon, when Odysseus stood before all the kings of the Achaeans and told them what Achilles had said, the hearts of everyone there were filled with trouble and with sorrow, and the silence around them was deep. But then Nestor said, Dear friends, let us eat and drink together, for there is courage and strength in these things. Death may come, yes, but while there is breath, there is hope. So they ate and drank together, enjoying the rich taste of the honey-hearted wine. And after a while they all went off to sleep in their tents beside their boats and the sea. And on the other side of the wall they had built, on the other side of that bristling barricade, constructed hastily of oak trees piled atop each other, on the other side slept the Trojan army, in their thousands, in their tents, sleeping beneath the great city which they loved. And behind the walls of Troy slept all the families of the Trojan soldiers. And King Priam slept, and his queen Hecuba, and all their children. All of them, between the whispering sea and the high towers of Troy, all of them sleeping, beneath the same circling stars and the moon. Well, the next morning, when Helios drove his chariot of golden fire into the sky, the Trojans did not linger beside their campfires, but took hold of sword and spear and approached the wall the Achaeans had built. And as they drew closer, in their thousands, they saw the great trees out of which the wall was made, trees with branches and roots jutting at odd angles, most of these trees by this time having lost their bark and their leaves. And though this wall had been built hastily in the night, of trees simply piled atop one another in a great barricade. The Achaeans had taken the time to build a gate. They had cut several of the trees into boards, and put these boards together to make a gate smooth and well-fitting. And behind this gate there was a great bolt made from an oak tree, keeping the gate shut. So the Trojans approached this gate, and at first they simply took their spears and pounded on that gate with all their strength, but it was too strong. So some went away to get a great tree to use as a ram. But before they returned, Hector came running up with an immense stone he was holding above his head, and with a great cry he hurled it through the air. Wham! It hit that gate dead center, and it cracked and buckled, and the bolt broke. And the gate caved in, and the Trojans streamed in through that gate, and met the Greeks there. And the fighting was fierce between the trees of that wall and the ships themselves, and many warriors soon lay on the ground. But the Trojans had the upper hand. They pressed the Greeks back and back. And there was a boat there. Now this boat was the boat of Protesilaus, the first Greek warrior to set his foot upon the shore, and the first one to die. He'd been dead 9 years now, but his boat remained, and the Trojans approached it, driving the Greeks away from it. And soon only Ajax was left, Ajax with his immense shield, but he too was forced to leap up onto the deck to save himself. But in a flash Hector leapt up onto the deck, and he approached Ajax, and he took his spear and hurled it through the air. Shoom it went, and it hit Ajax's shield dead center, but the force of the blow was so great that it went all the way through the shield, and it was only by twisting to the side at the last moment that Ajax avoided death. And now Hector brandished his sword and approached Ajax, and Ajax, for his part, was reluctant to cast his spear away, so hemmed in was he by Trojan warriors. So instead he thrashed and wheeled around with this spear, keeping them from him. But Hector was unafraid, and he darted forward, and in a single blow he cut the end of that spear from the shaft, and the head of that spear clattered to the deck. And he leapt forward again with his bright sword, and Ajax, fearing for his life, leapt from the boat and ran away. And now Hector called for fire, and a torch thrown by a Trojan came wheeling through the air and landed on the deck. And Hector picked it up and thrust it down below deck amid the timbers there. And then a second torch came, and a third. These two he set down in the midst of that boat, and soon he had to leap from that boat because the flames were sweeping across the deck and then crackling up the mast. So a great cheer went up from the Trojans, but the Greeks were filled only with fear. And they pressed forward, hoping to break through the Trojan ranks, but they found this impossible. But though many Greek soldiers ran towards this boat to try to save it, there was one man who ran in the opposite direction, and this was Patroclus. He ran through the Greek camp, past all the ships of the Achaeans, until at last he came to the edge of the camp and to the tent of Achilles. The Myrmidons were there, loading jars of honey and sweet wine into their boats, preparing for the journey home across the sea. And breathless Patroclus ran into the tent of Achilles. Achilles had just wrapped his lyre in purple cloth and picked it up. He was preparing to stow it in his boat for the journey home. And Patroclus said, "Achilles, do you see what is happening? Do you see?" Achilles looked out the door of the tent. Far in the distance he could see smoke rising. "I see," said Achilles. "You see," said Patroclus, "but do you feel? Do you feel how all our companions will be marooned here, their boats burned, all of them ground down, killed on this shore by Hector and all his warriors?" "They have made their choice, Patroclus," said Achilles, "as I have made mine." "My love," said Patroclus, "you do not need to be so cold. I know there is compassion in your heart. We can do something. We can help them." "I will not," said Achilles. "Well, if you will not," said Patroclus, "I will. What of your armor? Achilles, what if I were to wear your armor? If I did that, if everyone saw the gleaming armor made by Hephaestus for your father, if they saw that armor, they would take me for you. The Trojans would be filled with fear, and then we would have a chance. We could drive them back, away from the boats, away from the wall. Patroclus, said Achilles, what trouble is this you were brewing for the two of us? This is not trouble, said Patroclus. This is a good thing. I will help them. They can be saved. If you do this, said Achilles, then yes, drive them away from the boats, drive them away from the wall, but do not go farther. Do not drive the Trojans across the river Scamander. Do not in any way attempt to take the city of Troy, for that, I think, is a thing that the gods will not allow. Do not fear, said Patroclus. I will drive them away from our boats, drive them away from the wall, but I will go no farther. Then wear my armor, and do what good you can, said Achilles, but return to me here, so that you and I may set sail for home. I will, said Patroclus. And so he put the armor on, the gleaming armor fashioned out of red gold by the god Hephaestus himself, and given to Achilles' father, King Peleus, in a meadow at the top of Mount Pelion long ago, at a wedding where the gods and the humans had laughed and danced together in a harmony that it seemed would never end. He put this armor on, and when he did so, his body shone like the sun. And then he kissed Achilles goodbye, and as Achilles watched him go, Patroclus turned and walked out of the tent and into the light. He looked far off, and he could see the smoke rising, more of it now, black smoke rising into the sky. And Patroclus took his spear from where it stood leaning against the stern of their boat, and he picked that spear up, and he began to walk. He walked through the Greek camp, the light of Helios shining on the armor he wore. And seeing the smoke, he began to walk faster and faster. And finally, he broke into a run. Closer and closer he came. He could hear their voices now, shouting, the Greeks and the Trojans. He could see the swords and the spears shining in the air. He could see the flames climbing up the mast of that boat, devouring it. He ran, and he ran harder still, and when he came close to that boat, he leapt onto the deck of a nearby ship. And he stood before them all, and shining in the sun, he gave a great cry. And they saw him there, standing on the deck of that boat, like a god, the armor shining, resplendent, giving its light out to the world in every direction. And in that moment, hope entered the hearts of every Greek warrior, and fear entered the hearts of the Trojans. They remembered Achilles, how he had killed Cygnus, the unkillable man, on the beach when the Greeks first arrived at Troy. So that now, as one, they gasped, they shrank back, and Patroclus, brandishing his spear, leapt from that boat and after the Trojans. And quickly, the Trojans were driven away from the ships and through the shattered gates of the wall. But Patroclus did not stop there. He hurled his spear. He took down a Trojan warrior. He pulled the spear from the man's body, and he kept running. And soon the Trojans were well away from the wall. But still, Patroclus did not stop. He kept running with all the Greek army behind him, shouting. Shouting they went, and soon they came to the river Scamander, and they drove the Trojan warriors into that river. Pell-mell they went, thrashing, running, wading through those waters. And many were cut down, so that the river ran red with their blood. And Patroclus clambered out onto the other side, and the Greeks were behind him. And they went further, running towards the city of Troy. There it was, so close. It could be taken today, thought Patroclus. Perhaps I am the one to end this war on this day. And he looked as the warriors fought around him, spears and swords gleaming in the bright air. He looked, and he saw that part of the wall had a slope to it. There was an incline. A man could perhaps climb it. And he walked towards this part of the wall, and he saw cracks and gouges in the stones. And in fact, These were the claw marks of the sea dragon who had attacked Troy so many years before. So, fitting his feet into these gouges in the stone, Patroclus began to climb. Higher and higher he went, the bright blue air above him. Behind him, the shouts of men fighting, wrestling, fighting there on the plain. Higher and higher he went, and then suddenly, wham! A great blow struck him down to the ground. What was that? He looked. No one was there. No one was on the wall. What had happened? But with renewed strength, he stood up and he walked to the wall and he fit his feet more easily now. Finding those gouges, he went higher up on the stones, climbing the wall of Troy. As Helios, the sun god, shone down, as far down the warriors struggled, and then another blow, wham! And he landed down on the ground. What magic is this, he thought. I can end this. He stood up. Again, he came to the wall. He remembered green dice in his hands as a boy. This was just another game. He would win this game. He would end the war. Higher and higher he went, and then a third blow, wham! And he was down on the ground again, looking up, dizzy at the sky. What strange magic is this, thought Patroclus. But still, he stood up again. He approached the wall. Finding those gouges in the stones, he began to climb. He remembered green dice rattling in his hands as a boy. This was just another game. He would win this game. He would end the war on this day. The sky bright above him. Higher he went. Arrows showered down upon him, but he beat them away with his shield. And then a third blow came. Wham! And he was down on the grass. And he looked up. And in the air above him, he saw a man. A man beautiful, resplendent, like the sun. And he knew this man to be in fact the god Apollo. And Apollo looked at him and said, "You shall not." And his voice rang in his ears as Apollo faded away. And Patroclus staggered up. He looked around. The city of Troy was behind him, immense, unconquerable. Far away, he saw smoke rising into the air from Protesilaus' boat. How had he come so far from home? What would he do? Why was he here? And then Apollo came behind him and struck him a fourth and final blow between the shoulder blades. And Patroclus' spear shattered into a cloud of dust, and his armor fell from his body, and his helmet toppled from his head and fell to the ground. His ears ringing, he swayed, shaken by the god, beaten by the god, and his long dark hair tumbled down, and everyone saw it. This was not the bright, gleaming, shining hair of Achilles, but the hair of someone else. And all the Trojans knew in that moment that this was not Achilles. And seeing this, they came closer, curious and then joyful. "It's not Achilles," someone said. And a Trojan named Euphorbus ran out of the throng of warriors and slashed Patroclus across the back, but then ran back into the crowd, fearful still of his power. And then out of the crowd came a single man, strong, beautiful, holding a spear, and it was Hector. And he walked straight towards Patroclus. And trembling, Patroclus raised his spear and cast it into the air, but it was a weak blow. It glanced off the side of Hector's shield and fell to the ground. And still Hector came on, and with something almost like sorrow in his eyes, he cast his spear, and it struck Patroclus square in the chest, so that he staggered back, and gagging on blood, he fell down to the ground. And Hector ran to him and stood over him and said, "Go to the world of death, poor man, and leave me and my city in peace." And Patroclus, with his last breath, looked up at Hector and said, "Hector, be not proud, for your death shall follow mine close behind. For my love Achilles will come. He will hunt you down, and he cannot be beaten." "Let him come," said Hector, "for I am of Troy, and here I make my stand. And who is to say but that I might not kill Achilles, and send him down to join you soon in the kingdom of shadows and death?" And with that Hector planted his foot upon Patroclus' chest, and wrenched the spear from his body. And Patroclus died, his spirit plunging down into the depths, falling as though the earth were suddenly water, and his spirit a stone, plunging, falling, dropping down through the numberless depths, grieving and crying as it went, until finally it came to the kingdom of death. And like a ripple moving through water, the news of Patroclus' death moved through the battlefield and into the Greek camp, so that soon Odysseus heard of it, and Agamemnon, and Ajax, and Diomedes. But when the old man Nestor heard this news, he turned to his son Antilochus and said, "Antilochus, run across the battlefield, run through the Greek camp, go to Achilles, and tell him what has happened. Though it will plunge him into black despair, tell him this news, for he must be told." So Antilochus, heeding his father's words, ran across the battlefield and into the Greek camp. He ran past all of the tents, past all of the boats, until he came to the tent of Achilles. But Achilles was not in his tent. Fearful in his heart, he had gone up onto the deck of his ship to watch the battle. So for a long while he had looked far off. He had seen how Patroclus and the Achaeans had driven the Trojans away from the boats, away from the wall they had built. He had seen how they had pursued them across the plain, even into the river Scamander, and how they had not stopped there but gone on, even to the gates of Troy itself. But there he could not see anything. All was dust and glinting light on armor. Fearfully he had watched, and now he saw Antilochus coming, running to him. So he leapt down from his boat to stand before him. Antilochus arrived, panting and gasping. The two of them looked at each other. Each of them a thread now in a larger tapestry. Each of them a note in a larger music. Both of them part of a pattern, an eternal pattern, to be repeated over and over. Achilles knew in his heart what Antilochus would say. And Antilochus could do nothing but say the words. "Achilles, Patroclus has fallen. He has been slain by Hector before the gates of Troy, and his soul has gone down to the world of Hades." Hearing these words, Achilles fell to his knees. He gave a great red cry which split the air, and then he beat the ground with his fists, shouting, and he clutched handfuls of the dirt in his hands and smeared that dirt over his face as his tears fell down into the generous earth. And then, in the midst of the storm of his grief, he looked up at Antilochus, at the sky, at all the wild gods in all the corners of the world, and he said, "I will kill them. I will kill them all." Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this story with me. As always, I encourage you to go into this story, to enter it by whatever way feels right for you. I encourage you to think back, to remember the events we've just heard, and to find your way to one of them which draws you in. Like a tree in a forest, like a certain place in a park, a certain melody in a song, something which grabs you, which holds you. It doesn't have to be a beautiful or a nice moment. Gosh, definitely not. Just something which sort of buzzes for you. It's like acupuncture. If you've ever had acupuncture, they put some needles in, but there's certain ones that are like, oh, you can feel it. You feel a jolt. So I encourage you to go into this story and find a place that gives you a jolt. For me, one such moment is Helen weaving in her room. It's marvelous, huh? I love it. That's a small detail in the Iliad. It's mentioned just once. Homer doesn't describe it in great detail. And let me give it to you here in the original. I mean, that's a very suspect word with stories like this, which have been told and passed down by thousands of storytellers. But let me give it to you as Homer describes it. This is in Book 3 of the Iliad. We're going to start at line 122. Look how technical we're getting. In a translation by A.T. Murray. This is from the Loeb edition. It's a moment which I did not include in the story when Iris comes as a messenger to Helen in Troy. Iris, the goddess, sort of the messenger goddess, rainbow goddess, and says, Helen, everybody's assembled out there on the plain before the city. Come see. And she goes to the walls of Troy and she looks out at all of the warriors. And there's this very sort of touching scene where she recognizes many of the Greek warriors and explains who they are to Priam. It's touching because she hasn't seen them in a while. And these are the enemies of Troy. But she knows them by name and can recognize them at a distance. So in any case, I cut that just because you can't tell everything. And but it does mention her weaving. So here we go. She, meaning Iris, found Helen in the hall, where she was weaving a great purple web of double fold, on which she was embroidering many battles of the horse-taming Trojans and the bronze-clad Achaeans, which for her sake they had endured at the hands of Ares. Just one sentence, that's it. And it's a kind of luxurious sentence you often get in Homer, describing, what she's weaving, describing these battles, and bringing in a god, Ares in this case. And thinking of this marvelous moment, I am thinking also of the way we call a story a yarn. I'm going to spin a yarn. I'm going to tell you a story. And I'm thinking of the word sutra in Sanskrit, which has come to mean sort of a verse or some lines of verse, but literally means thread. And I'm thinking also of the Greek word rhapsode, or a rhapsodist, as we might say now, which literally means someone who is sewing songs together. And I'm also thinking of the ancient Greek word oime, which is best translated as story thread, according to Gregory Nagy, Nagy, the Homeric scholar. Story thread. So we have all these connections between weaving and stories. And what are the reasons for that? Well, who knows? Certainly stories have been preserved by women a lot of the time through history. Women who would weave together and tell stories as they wove, as they knit, as they work with threads of any kind. I'm also thinking of the three fates. Those three women, one young, one middle-aged, one elderly, who make yarn, make thread, and cut it. The first of them spins the thread, the second one measures it, and the third cuts it. And these threads are not simply threads, of course. They are the lives of humans, of men and women. And so the implication is that what it is to be alive is to be a thread. And what do we do with threads? We weave them. We weave them into larger patterns. And so here we have Helen at the center of this story, both chronologically and both in terms of her actions. Here we have her, Helen, weaving. It's remarkable. And what is she weaving? She is weaving the battles taking place for her sake outside of Troy, between the Achaeans and the Trojans. She could have chosen to weave something else. She could weave an escape. She could weave some tapestry showing a world where there is no war and everything is happy and it's peace and love and laughter all the time. But instead, she wrestles with her condition, with the events around her through art, through the making of beauty with her hands. Carl Jung has said that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Let's have that again. Carl Jung. We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So Helen, in this scene, in this moment, is not focusing on a distant, heavenly world where everything is amazing. She is instead wrestling with what is happening to her and around her, which is not pretty, which is ugly, which includes death and blood and sorrow. But she is transforming these events, transforming them through art. She is making beauty out of them. And does she put herself in this tapestry? Does she weave Troy into that tapestry and that tower with her in it, weaving the tapestry? Well, we don't know. But for a moment here, in the center of this maelstrom of desire and death and the divine, for a moment it seems that perhaps Helen can weave her fate, that she is like a goddess and can bring life to these characters, as Homer has done, as storytelling does do. She can bring life to them through the actions of her hands and through her art and through this action of weaving. And later on, we have this vision of Achilles in his tent, singing and playing his lyre, which is also remarkable to me. Here he is, this big warrior, this bringer of death, this man who can bring death to others. And when they go to find him, he is in his tent playing and singing for Patroclus. And he, too, is not singing anything that is an escape, but he is singing of the glorious deeds of heroes. That's what the original says, or well, a translation of the original. He is singing of the glorious deeds of heroes. So he, too, is not singing something about something far away in subject matter. He's not singing about love or fruits, rabbits in a field, some sort of beautiful flowery thing. But he is, in a way, wrestling, perhaps, with what is happening around him, battle and death. Does he long for those things? He's outside of the fight. He has chosen to withdraw, to not be a part of the army. Does he still long for those things, for the glory of being a hero? Perhaps so. Or perhaps it's all he knows. Or perhaps he's inspired by it in other ways. Now, I described his song, and I put in the story of Heracles, the great sort of superhero of the ancient world. Homer doesn't say exactly what Achilles is singing about. He just says the glorious deeds of heroes. Could be he's singing about the Trojan War, I suppose. That's also possible. But it seems more likely to me that he's hearkening back to some sort of other heroic adventure story. So those moments inspire me, not simply because they offer us a break from the bloodshed of the war, but because they reaffirm for me the importance and the value of story, which is how we give order to the world often. Scientists do that with theories, or a story of a nation, or a story of a person, your own story. Where are you from? Where are you going? Telling a story about yourself or about anything in the world, it's a way to give order to that world, a world which often seems chaotic and capable of great acts of destruction, both through our own hands and through lightning, hurricanes, floods, storms, all the other wild, rowdy events that happen in this world. And of course, obviously, that's what I'm doing by telling this story, is containing, I suppose, the chaos of death and battle and war in a narrative, which is beautiful. Though the heart of it, or at the heart, there's lots of death, it is beautiful to me. And what else have I got to say? I hope this story can live in your heart. I hope it stays lit in your head. I hope it's a place you can visit and that it nourishes you in some way. What else? Oh, the wall. Yeah. So in Homer, it's a little unclear, but as far as I can tell, Homer describes the Greeks, the Achaeans, building this wall to protect their ships in an act of desperation, and they build this wall in a night and a day. He describes how they have a council at night and they decide. Nestor, old man Nestor, has the idea and they get to work on the wall. It describes them working all the next day and it's finished by sundown. Now, we've got like 1,000 boats here and we've got, I haven't done the numbers, other people have, but like 50,000 warriors or something. So it's a big Greek camp. I mean, a day and a night, man, that's not a long time to build a wall. And plus they're desperate. So Homer describes the wall as a much more, architecturally kind of finished thing. Everything is smooth and well-fitting, the boards put together, and the craft by which the Greeks have done this is something which impresses even the gods. But I found it a little bit unlikely that they could, in so short a time, build such a wall. Plus, I just like the image of these trees that they just kind of pile up there in desperation. Trees, jutting out at odd angles, piled up as a barricade. That felt more true to me. Now, of course, maybe I don't even need to say this, but the culture that this story comes from valued craft, valued things that were well built and beautifully made. In our modern culture, well, I would say we do too, but we also hunger after a certain wildness and rowdiness because life can seem a little bit too controlled sometimes. So maybe that's part of my choice as well. I just wanted a little wilder image for that crazy wall they build. And I would point out as well the amazing way in which Homer flips what we might expect for this story. What I mean is that this is the story of the siege of Troy and the destruction of that city. But Homer doesn't describe the Trojans pent up behind their walls, running out of food maybe, running out of supplies, the efforts they take to supply their city using secrets and secret entrances, all that stuff. That would be, pretty good subject, you'd think, for a story. But instead he reverses it and he shows us the Greeks pent up behind a wall. They're the ones who were sequestered behind this wall, between the wall and their boats. The Iliad consists of 24 chapters. They're called books, usually. The wall is built in book 9, and it is not... the Greeks aren't free of it, really, until Achilles goes on his rampage, which is much later. I'm not remembering exactly, but we're talking... book, I don't know, in the 20s somewhere. So a lot of this story takes place behind the wall, showing them pent up there behind this wall. Another surprising move in Homer's telling of this story is, of course, Achilles, who's the main warrior of the Greeks, the strongest, the best, and he is not in the fight. And we get this amazing speech Isn't it? Isn't it just crazy? We get this amazing anti-war speech from Achilles. So the idea that this whole enterprise is just ridiculous and brutal and a horrible tragedy is expressed not through perhaps a Trojan or some other bystander, not through the gods, but through Achilles. Again, like Helen, he's someone at the heart of this story. There they are, Helen and Achilles. Helen, who began this whole tragedy, we could say, by running off with Paris, and Achilles, who is, well, part of his own tragedy and is bringing death and destruction to the world, or is the one most capable of doing that. So you might wonder, hearing the speech as I have given it to you, the speech of Achilles to Odysseus, Phoenix, and Ajax, if I've run away with it a bit. And I would say I really haven't. I haven't exaggerated. The speech in Homer is pretty strong. The only details I've added are the geopolitical ones. I added the bit about, I guess I just went a little further in having Achilles point out that they could very well stay home and stop messing with the Trojans. But the original is quite extreme. Let me give it to you here. This is Book 9. We're talking line 307. This is, Odysseus has just spoken. And here is the translation in the Loeb edition by A.T. Murray. Here we go. In answer to him spoke swift-footed Achilles, Zeus-born son of Laertes, Odysseus of many wiles. I must speak my words outright, exactly as I think, and as it will come to pass, so that you will not sit by me here on this side and on that, and prate endlessly. For hateful in my eyes, as the gates of Hades, is that man who hides one thing in his mind and says another. So I will speak what seems to me to be best. Not me, I think, will Atreus' son Agamemnon persuade, nor yet will the other Danaans, since it is clear there was to be no thanks for warring against the foe without respite. A like portion has he who stays back, and he who wars his best. And in one honor are held both the coward and the brave. Death comes alike to the idle man and to him who works much. Nor has it brought me any profit that I suffered woes at heart, constantly staking my life in fight. And so he goes on to say, basically, Agamemnon has wronged me. I worked hard, I fought for this guy, and what did I get? He just sent me away. And then further on, he says, but why must the Argives wage war against the Trojans? So why should the Greeks wage war against the Trojans? So he's voicing this question, which nobody else has asked. Why is this war even happening? But why must the Argives wage war against the Trojans? Why has he gathered and led here an army, this son of Atreus? That's Agamemnon. Was it not for fair-haired Helen's sake? Do they then alone of mortal men love their wives, these sons of Atreus? Whoever is a true man and sound of mind loves his own and cherishes her, just as I too loved her with all my heart, though she was but the captive of my spear. So he's talking about Briseis, who was taken from him by Agamemnon, this girl he took with his spear from another town, but he says he loves her. And again, what I would point out is just he's asking these sort of big questions, Do they then alone of mortal men love their wives, these sons of Atreus? So he's saying, well, the Greeks love their wives and their families, but I think he's implying, the Trojans do as well. And then further on, he says, speaking of Agamemnon, never again will he, Agamemnon, deceive me with words. This is enough for him. But let him go to his ruin at his ease, since Zeus the counselor has utterly robbed him of his mind. Hateful in my eyes are his gifts. I count them at a hair's worth. Not even if he gave me 10 times and 20 times all that now he has, and if yet other things should be added to it from somewhere. Not even though it were all the wealth that goes to Orchomenus, or to Thebes of Egypt, where treasures in greatest store are laid up in men's houses. Thebes, which is a city of 100 gates, from each of which sally out 200 warriors with horses and chariots. No, not even if he gave gifts as many as sand and dust. Not even so will Agamemnon any more persuade my heart. until he has paid the full price of all the outrage that stings my heart. And the daughter of Agamemnon, son of Atreus, I will not wed, not even though she vied in beauty with golden Aphrodite, and in handiwork with a peer of flashing-eyed Athena. Not even so will I wed her. Let him choose another of the Achaeans who suits him better and is more kingly than I. And then further on he says, And I would counsel you others also to sail back home, since there is no longer hope that you will win the goal of steep Ilios. For mightily does Zeus, whose voice resounds afar, hold out his hand over it, and its people are filled with courage. So that's the deal. I don't want anything to do with Agamemnon or any of his gifts, and I'm getting out of here, and you all should too, basically. So have I exaggerated? Have I pushed Achilles' speech so that it is a greater anti-war speech than it is in Homer? Well, short answer, I would say a little, but not a lot. And you can read the original in translation and see what you think yourself. And the other detail of this part of the story I would bring our attention to is that of Patroclus, who goes beyond what is fated, who is told by Achilles to drive the Trojans away from the boats and away from the wall, but to go no farther. And he does, of course, go too far. He goes over the river, he tries to take Troy itself, and he fails and he dies. Although he fails, more specifically, right, Apollo stops him. He isn't stopped by Trojans exactly, but he is killed completely with Apollo being the ringleader, the one who makes it happen. He hits him 3 times, keeps him away from the wall, and then he gives him this tremendous blow on the back. Wham! All his armor falls off, his spear shatters, his helmet falls off. So does he fail? Well, he is made to fail by the gods. And again, we have this question of free will. Did he have a choice? He chose to go beyond, and the gods punished him for it, basically. So again, we have this conception of fate. Our lives are set. Those 3 fates, they measure out our lives. And not only that, but the shape of our lives is determined by the fates or by the gods. That would seem to be, it's one conception that comes out of the world of this story, one idea about it. And Achilles knows this, which is interesting. He knows that Patroclus shouldn't go too far. He also knows that Patroclus has the capacity to go too far, which that is probably simply psychological. If you remember, Patroclus killed a playmate of his when he was a child. Accidentally, he was playing dice with another child, and he pushed another boy who hit his head on a rock and died. So throughout this story, Patroclus is depicted as someone who has restraint, who knows the risks and the dangers and the death which can result from going too far. Because as a small boy, a young boy, he went too far. And he let out his rage, his anger, and killed another childhood playmate. By accident, of course. And so he provides a contrast to Achilles, who gives into his rage, and with that rage, he's angry at Agamemnon, and so he chooses not to fight. And death is the result for his colleagues, for his fellow warriors. But here we have Patroclus losing it and just going too far. As we know he is capable of doing, in his life he's done that, but for a long time it seemed he has remembered those lessons that he learned, that lesson he learned as a child, and has not gone too far. He's able to show restraint, whereas Achilles is not able to do that. So it's a remarkable moment. And I guess the question is, are all the characters in this epic governed by a fate which they cannot escape? Or do some of them make choices which alter their lives, either for better or for worse? Certainly Achilles is given a choice. His mother, the sea goddess Thetis, tells him he can choose either a short life that's glorious and filled with fame, or a long life which is comfortable and quiet. So he at least has a choice. Does Helen have a choice? Does Paris have a choice? Paris is famously given a choice which is no choice at all. Helen seems simply herself. Is she too an instrument of the gods? Is every human here simply living out a purpose given to them by the gods? Or do they get to choose? Do they get to decide which path to go down? Of course, in America, we love to believe that we can choose our fates. It's up to us. This is the source of much joy and a sense of freedom. It is also the source of much suffering. Because if it's all up to you and you fail, then it's your fault. And it's not the system. It's not racism. It's not sexism. It's not any other ism. It's not some, thing the gods decided. It was all up to you, man. It's all up to you. So if you're a millionaire, it's all because of how great you are. And if you are living in poverty, it's all because of how, lazy you are, and uncool, and unintelligent. That's the message America gives us, which is both a shackle around our ankles and, to some measure, a liberating message. And if America could go on without that message, if you could take that idea out of America, I wonder what would be left. And I am thinking of Rumi and of the Buddha. Rumi, the Muslim poet and Sufi mystic, who began his life as a Muslim theologian, basically a combination between a minister and a lawyer, as we think of it now. Like his father had been. He was following in his father's footsteps. And then he met the spiritual wild man, Shams, and Rumi began to dance at all hours of the day and night and to write poetry. And he was just ecstatic with the divine for the rest of his life. Was that fated? Was that part of the plan? Was that part of the arc of his life? And Buddha, similar story. He began life as a prince living in luxury and broke out of that and sat beneath a tree and became the enlightened one and became awake. Did these individuals decide to do these things? Did they make a choice? Or were they chosen by the divine? Were they simply more open to the forces beyond, which in this story are the gods and goddesses? But in other stories, in other ideas about the world, are spirits, are, the powers beyond us, the mystery. That's an open question, but I am inspired by Rumi dancing and singing. I am inspired by Buddha sitting under that tree and suddenly glowing with light. Thank you for listening to this story. Thank you for attending to it. I invite you to make a gift to this story. It will deepen your relationship with it. It will also nourish the story and yourself so that it may go on and flourish in a time beyond our own. And by our attention, we nourish this story, but also with gifts. Give it some breath. Give it a song. Give it a poem that you write and then give away to the wild in some way. That is a way to be in dialogue with this story, to relate to it as a living being, to relate to it as an ecology of which you are a part. We enter the forest and suddenly we are a part of that forest, and our breath is taken in by the trees, and the breath of the trees is taken up by us. This story isn't something far away. It's right here. It's in us. It may be in you. There are more stories on my website, which is jayleeming.com, JAYLEEMING.com. If you are able to support my work as a storyteller and that podcast, please do so. You can do that via patreon.com/storyjl. That's patreon.com/storyjl. I often tell stories online, such as the Iliad, such as other large, big, beautiful stories, and those tellings are free to folks that are a part of my Patreon community. Epics and big stories work well in that format online because you can tell a little piece of it every week. I told the Mahabharata. I've done that a couple times online. It takes like 14 weeks, but it's a great way to get through the summer, the spring, the autumn, or the winter. It's a great way to move forward through this world. May this story live in your heart. Thank you for listening, and take care.